Today we'll be discussing how to think from first principles. First principles are the fundamental building blocks of an idea. They're the most indivisible part that we know to be true and that we use to build more complex thoughts. I know this sounds a little abstract right now, but let me give you some history, an analogy, and an example. Thinking from first principles isn't a new or groundbreaking idea. In fact, it's been the dominant mode of thinking among all great scientists and philosophers for a while now. It's probably the single most consistent factor among great thinkers. Although there have been many practitioners of this way of thinking, I'd like to zoom in on one that you may have heard about, Aristotle. He was a prolific organizer who believed that everything could be divided into categories and subcategories. The smallest subcategory in any domain is what we would call a first principle. He was also one of the earliest empiricists that we know about. An empiricist is someone who believes that all knowledge is achieved through experience. As one of the earliest major contributors to the study of biology, it makes sense that Aristotle was a first principles thinker. He would dissect animals to gain real-world knowledge and then use his capacity for reason to organize and categorize the information. This cycle of seeking knowledge through experience and using reason to give it structure is how one comes to know the first principles of a subject. Aristotle believed that we couldn't possess true knowledge unless we understood these principles. Now that you have a slight understanding of the history, let me give you an analogy about thinking from first principles. Think of your knowledge in a specific domain as a tree. Someone who thinks from first principles, an unconventional thinker, will understand that body of knowledge from the fruit all the way down to the root. The fruit is what we see in front of us. It's the unearned knowledge that we can obtain, experience, and repeat right away. We can look at an apple tree, say that it's just a thing that produces apples, and call it a day. It's a very shallow understanding of the tree, but it's not untrue. On the other hand, a first principles thinker will want to know how this creation really came to be. They'll see that the apple is connected to a branch, and every branch is a subset of a greater whole called a trunk. Finally, they'll see that the root is the most fundamental part of the tree, which gives rise to the fruit. They've gathered multiple pieces of information about the tree through experience, but they've also organized the pieces of information in relation to each other. These free-floating facts have been transformed into an organized body of knowledge. The conventional thinker will believe that they can put the apple seeds anywhere and grow delicious apples. They lack true understanding. Upon examining the roots, the first principles thinker will see that a delicious fruit starts with good soil. They have a nuanced understanding. The conventional thinker is the guy at the cocktail party who has all of the interesting facts. His knowledge consists solely of fruit that he can display. On the contrary, the unconventional thinker is consistently focused on building trees of knowledge. Like Aristotle, he or she goes back and forth between experience and reason to build an organized and structured body of knowledge. A tree planted in good soil will have strong and healthy roots and thus produce delicious fruit. Likewise, an idea that blooms from true and beautiful first principles will itself be beautiful and true. Naturally, if the simple parts that make up a complex whole are good and true, then the complex whole must be good and true as well. This is important because, as we discussed in the last video, a true understanding of the world is necessary to obtain power. Any complex beliefs we hold can only be true if the parts that make them up are true. To make this more concrete, let's think about the process of writing an essay from first principles. A well-written essay is like a delicious fruit. It's enjoyable to consume and difficult to produce without understanding its fundamentals. We can identify the fundamentals by breaking it down into its component parts. An essay is a collection of paragraphs. Well, a paragraph is a collection of sentences. A sentence is a collection of words, and words are a collection of letters, and letters are the fundamental building blocks of an essay. Once the components of an essay are understood, we can look at improving each one from the simplest to the complex. If we can make each individual component remarkable, then the totality should be remarkable, and that is the art of first principles thinking. Now let's talk about the benefits. There are several benefits that come from understanding an idea down to its fundamental components. The first is innovation. Once you understand the fundamentals of an idea, you can rearrange them, change them, or put them together differently to create a new idea or a product. In our writing example, we could have created another layer above the essay. We could call a collection of essays a book. We've now invented something new. The second benefit is optimization. A fundamental component can be changed in order to improve an idea or a product. For example, once we knew the fundamental components of the essay, we could put each of them under scrutiny to see how each component could be its best. But without knowing these components, it's impossible to make any sort of improvement. The third benefit is integration. Once you understand the foundational components of an idea, it becomes a lot easier to integrate new knowledge into your understanding. For example, once you know how to write letters, it becomes easier to make words. Once you know how to write words, you can make sentences. Once you can make sentences, you can make paragraphs, then essays, then books, then entire libraries. And then the final benefit is dissemination. Understanding the foundational components of an idea makes it easier to transfer that complex idea to another person. You can start with the simplest component and build up the idea from there. This is exactly what we try to do in schools. We teach kids how to write the alphabet, then words, and so on. First principle thinkers are better teachers because they can determine the exact level where a student's understanding falls apart. So you see the benefits, but how can someone become a first principles thinker? Thinking from first principles is simple, but not easy. I just have one piece of actionable advice, and it's inspired by Aristotle. Create hierarchies, like what we did with the essay example. Most ideas are nested inside or outside one another, and it's the job of a first principles thinker to map out how these ideas are linked. As Aristotle, like all empiricists would say, knowledge begins with experience. The world is presenting fruit all around you, amazing and complex acts of creation. Discovering the roots of these creations starts with questions such as why or how. The ultimate truth seeker must not be satisfied with fruit, yet they realize that the search for roots is never ending. Once they've reduced an idea down to the smallest fundamentals that they can conceive of, they have arrived at the first principles. These fundamentals can be used to innovate, optimize, learn more complex ideas, or to teach others. One of the best ways to discover these fundamentals is by actually writing down and organizing the information in a subject that you're interested in by using a hierarchy or a mind map like how we did with the essay.